Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah.
Hey,
Hello, how are you?
doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. How's your day going?
So far, so good. So far, so good. How's yours?
Yeah, mine is good. The nerves have
Mm-hmm.
just started kicking in, but I got this.
Yeah, now you got it. You got it.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for
Mm-hmm.
joining. Thanks for taking the time,
Mm-hmm.
to have this conversation. So,
Yes.
to everyone that just joined, welcome to Devout Talk Show. Welcome to our live conversation. Before I say I do, the legal side of marriage. So that is what we are going to be talking about. And marriage being an institution that was made by God, put here on earth to represent Christ. There are certain things that we need to look at because we live on earth. We have the government, we have the legal side of things, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And today I am joined by Mr. Blessing Wadesango. So thank you so much for joining, Mr. Blessing. Thank you so much for making time. So just give us a brief introduction of who you are, and then we just delve right into it.
Good. So, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I do love sharing at any opportunity that I get. Sharing to my youth. I'm a youth advisor at my church. Well, I
Yeah,
used to be, but it's something that's quite dear to my heart. So, I'm an attorney by profession.
all right.
11 years now in the field. I primarily focus in corporate law.
Mhm.
That's the stuff that I normally do. But I'm really happy to be here. The legal implications of marriage.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. So before we get
Mhm.
into the actual conversation, I just want to notify people that the other guest, she will not be joining us due to other reasons, but we are going on. The show still goes on. So, Mr. Blessing, I have two questions for you. The
Mhm.
first one is, if you had to create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
Interesting one. So, if I had to one law which everyone had to
Yeah.
follow, it should be expected 30 minutes of me time in a day where they're
Mm-hmm.
not on their phone, they're not doing anything, they're just getting time to reflect. Reason I say that is I think like often, we've become robots. Like
Yeah.
like you just get on with your day, you wake up, you go to school. Next thing, you're at home, you have to cook, and after that, you're talking to people, and you have to enjoy
Yeah.
to self-introspect, So I would make it a law that you need to have at least like 15 to 30 minutes of me time. Like
Mm.
you have to take it. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree because we're so consumed with a lot of information, we tend to lose ourselves along the way. And
Correct.
then the second one, if you were not, you said in attorney, right? If you were not
Mhm.
in that career path, what other career do you think you would have pursued?
Oh, so if I wasn't an attorney, I would probably have been a full-time musician,
Okay.
which my parents would have they wouldn't have accepted or agreed
Mm.
to that, but I definitely would have been a full-time musician. I think that's my second passion. That's my other calling. I think
Yeah.
that's my actual calling. I think it's in worship music. So I'm Christian, so worship music is making it, listening to it, everything involved with
Yeah.
music. That's me. So would have been a musician.
All right. Okay. That's interesting to know. All right. So let's delve right into it. When we're having conversations, I really like to define what we're talking about. So just give us
Mhm.
a definition. What is marriage, especially the legal part of it? What does marriage
Mhm.
mean? And even if you can incorporate what does the South African law say
Mhm.
in terms of defining
Mhm.
marriage as a whole? Yeah.
All right. So according to South African law, um, is a union. or joining
Mm-hmm.
together of two people. So um, later on, we have what we call the Marriage Act, but we also now have a Recognition of Marriages Act, and that one, from a Christian perspective, it then brought up stuff like civil unions, which
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to discuss later. But that's where now even same sex were allowed.
Yes, yes, yes.
But under the original Marriages Act was a union between a man registered and bound by law. So that
Mm-hmm.
was the legal definition of marriage, is the of man and woman
All right.
initially before uh, recognition of civil marriages, or
Okay.
recognition of marriages then happened.
Yes. All right. Okay. So in a nutshell, it's basically just a union. You said before civil marriages. Prior to that, what did we have?
So no, so we do have. I meant before. So we had the Marriage Act. The initial Marriages Act only defined marriage as being a union between man and wife. And then
Oh,
later on, when we had the civil union, there's a separate act called the Civil Union Act. The
yeah.
Civil Union Act, that's where we started to see other changes to what the definition of marriage
Okay.
is.
Okay.
But then, yeah, I think yeah, that's something we will also get into.
Yes, yes, definitely. Okay, that's awesome. And then there are
Yeah.
different types of
Mhm,
marriage regimes under the South African law. Could you
mhm,
please just break it down, and especially what are the consequences or the even the benefits?
mhm,
Because I think it's not a bad
mhm,
thing, and maybe
mhm,
some of the disadvantages or advantages that come
mhm.
with those types of marriage types. Yeah.
All right. So under South African law, we have broadly um, three types of marriages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to break down. After I break them down, I'll break each of one. But we do have your civil marriages. You've got your customary marriages, and then you also have your civil unions.
Okay.
So under your civil marriages, that's the one that's governed by the Marriages Act, where you have your clear rights and responsibilities, man and woman. And then your customary marriages, that's where this is the one that honors the cultural traditions in South Africa.
Okay.
But if only a lobola, if you only did a lobola um, procedure, what would you do to get that recognized under the law, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where you'd need to, after you've done your lobola, you'd need to go to Home Affairs and then you need to get it registered. So that's the other type. And then with your civil union, that's the one that now Civil Union Act. That's the one that came in 2006. That's the current one, and then that's the one that started to recognize the union between same-sex. So it was now giving equal protection, similar to what the Marriages Act was given to man and woman. The Civil
Mm-hmm.
Union Act was giving same-sex or heterosexual people the same rights and the same protections that under the Marriages Act that were there. So
Okay.
those are the broadly the three types of marriages. If we wanted to look at it, maybe even so you'd now start to see what do we have under civil, like under your civil marriage contracts, right? So the one that's governed by the Marriages Act. That's where you now have your marriage in community, marriage um, uh, out of community without accrual, and then out of community with accrual. So those
Mm-hmm.
are also the other types under civil marriages.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All
So
right.
I think if are you can you?
Yeah, yeah, you can go ahead. It's fine. Yeah.
So I was saying, so now if we wanted to look at broadly, if we were going to look at the now, what falls under the civil marriages, and I think that's where a lot of young people who are not married, they have a lot of questions. Say,
Yeah.
what does it mean for me legally when I'm about to
Mm.
get married? If my partner or my future spouse comes to me and says, I want us to get married with an A, not ANC, the party, but ANC, that's your anti-nuptial contract. So if someone says, I want to get married with the anti-nuptial contract with an ANC, what does that mean? So that would mean it's out of community. of property. But then now you need to look at the two things, right? Is it with accrual or without accrual? So let's first look at in community. So that's the
Okay.
one that I think most and even as believers, as children of God, most churches will recommend. From a doctrine perspective, a lot of churches will recommend that, get married in community of property. It gives equal protection, right, to both parties. To say if no one, and it could be maybe the I think one of the biggest can get a case where maybe one spouse is working and the other one isn't. But the one who's not working, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not contributing towards the marriage. They could be the
Okay.
ones who are taking care of the children, right? And that's not, and this happens both men and female. You can
Yeah.
actually get maybe the breadwinner being the wife, and then the man is the one who's at home taking care of the kids. It doesn't mean that he's doing anything less, right? Because
Yeah.
if he wasn't doing what he's doing, it means that the one who's going to work wasn't going to be able to make the money, wasn't going to be
Yeah.
able,
Okay.
not going to be able to bring the dough, back home, right? So what you're looking at is it gives what in community of property gives. It gives protection to say that regardless of who's bringing what, we're having a joint effort to accrue wealth as husband and wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're putting it in one big basket. It's going to benefit if you decide to have children, this is going to benefit our children. So no one can get disadvantaged, right? So that was, I think, one of the biggest positives of getting married in community of property. On the
Okay.
other hand, speaking as a lawyer, right? Speaking as a lawyer, you then see that sometimes getting married in community of property also has some disadvantages because the same way that you are sharing in the equity, the same way you're sharing with the joint wealth, you're also sharing in the joint responsibilities and the joint debts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one party amongst the two who's probably doing very, very high risk business, and then they do a high risk business and then it fails. What then
Okay.
happens is when the creditors come, they're not going to attach what the partner the spouse who was doing business only, right? They're going to attach everything because it's in community of property. So you
Yeah.
might then find yourself that the children now don't have a place to stay. Um, because you were married in community property. One partner made a mistake. You got into debt, and when the creditors come, they're going to attach everything that falls under the joint estate. So
Mm.
I guess that's the disadvantage
Okay.
of in community. And I guess maybe we can also then go to out of community. So in saying out of community, what then happens is, so in community, we're saying what's yours is mine, and
Mm-hmm.
what's mine is yours.
Yeah.
We're joint.
Yes.
If we're now speaking out of community, we're saying what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine, right?
Okay.
The disadvantages for young people out there is you then find that the challenge you get is it doesn't offer protection if one spouse is not working or is not
Um.
contributing towards that. But
Okay.
maybe their contribution is just not tangible. They are contributing, but maybe they're not contributing financially. The challenge with out of community of property is now if God forbid they were to separate, or even if one, and it's not just about divorce, right? It's even
Yeah.
about death.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
One
True.
partner dies, keep yeah, like, so if you were married to your partner and it's out of community of property, if he can determine everything that will go, and he can say if he doesn't want anything to come to you, everything that he had will now go to his parents or to his siblings, because
Mm.
now he has that
Mm.
choice. So it's not just about divorce, it's also just,
Mm.
even if in death you just don't have the
Mm.
protection, if
Okay.
you get married, um right, without a pool.
Yeah.
So uh, with accrual, so there's one we said there's one that's without accrual. So if we're
Yeah.
saying without accrual, how some do it. Some will say, so let's say you have established quite a lot of property before getting married. You would say, for the house that I bought, right? The house that I bought before we got married, I
Mm-hmm.
want to keep it in my name. The house that you had when we got married, to your name, right? But
Mm-hmm.
after we get married, everything that we have acquired as a couple, it falls part of our joint estate.
Okay.
It's we're putting it in one pot. That's the one with accrual.
All right.
So
Okay.
accrual is basically meaning to say that we're adding on at a specific from one specific point, we're adding on something. So yeah, I guess I've been talking for a while now, but I guess you kind
Yeah,
of get the
that's
point.
totally cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question within the community of property, and then when it comes to maybe one spouse dying, what then happens? Does it mean that since it's joined, it means what's mine is mine, what's his is his? Then let's say he passes, um, does the family have a say, or is it all which is it will it all come like to the wife or to the partner? What happens in such a situation?
So I think that's a good benefit of in community of property, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you're married in community of property and you have a will, you still, I always say this,
Um,
like you just need to make sure that when you get married, have a will. Like what you guys, you need to say what happens upon death, right? Because we're looking at two instances, right? If you get divorced, you walk away. So let's say it's now a 10 million, you guys build properties and you've got houses and your portfolios are worth 10 million. If it's at a divorce, you walk away with 50, your spouse walks away with 50. But
okay.
if it's at death, what then happens is the surviving spouse is automatically guaranteed 50% of that estate because of
Oh,
the marriage regime. Because of the
okay.
marriage regime, they're automatically guaranteed 50% of the estate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because that's what's theirs. What then
Yes.
happens to the other 50% that was of the deceased spouse? That's
Mm-hmm.
now determined by the will.
Ah,
So if
okay.
there's no will, would have to use what we call the interstate succession. And interstate succession is where we apply a formula where we then say we need to share the remainder. The deceased spouse will then share it between the surviving spouse and the children. But
Ah,
let's say there are no children, the surviving spouse would then end up also now getting that remaining 50%
yes.
if it's in
Okay.
community of property.
All right. I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes total sense.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes total
Yeah.
sense. All right. So, thousands of customary marriages go unregistered every year, and then this leads to disputes in terms of inheritances and stuff. So, may you please break down the documents that are needed or required to make a marriage legally recognized or fully recognized, and why it's important?
All right. So generally, if you're gonna, depending on the marriage that you have, so if it's like in community of property, just a civil marriage, you would just need your at Home Affairs they'll give you a list of the documents, but you need your IDs. You need to sign specific forms and affidavit.
Mhm.
So there's just it's a general list, so it includes your IDs. Um, they may also need just proof of your IDs, passports, or birth
Mhm.
certificates, depending on your age, and they also just need to make sure that there's consent. So I'm
Yes.
obviously assuming everyone here who will be joining a podcast is going to be above 18, but generally you just
Mhm.
need your IDs, you need any proof of just legal documentation, and just you also just need to go and sign the specific form. So most of they've made it quite easy at Home Affairs. You just go there and then you sign a specific form that includes some of the undertakings that you need to make at Home Affairs.
Okay. So is it something that you need to book online or you can just do a walk-in?
Um, so depending on you do need to book for a day, right?
Oh,
They will give you a day. If you want to go in, okay, you can come on the specific day, especially for those who decide to do court marriages. They'll give you a
yeah.
specific day where they'll say, okay, we're going to give you this day. Come with your spouse, come with witnesses, and then you sign in front of that marriage officer, and then you'd also then submit your copies of your IDs to
Mhm.
them.
All right. Okay, that's interesting. So the next segment, we're going to be looking at lobola and customary marriage.
Mhm.
And you know, we live in Africa, we're Africans. No lobola, according to our parents, you are not married, even though you go and sign
Mhm.
a marriage certificate at the Home Affairs. So you've already spoken about which contract or marriage contract lobola, so it falls under the customary act. So I think
Mhm.
that has been answered. However, I saw a TikTok scenario where this lawyer said, if you go through the lobola process and you decide that you and your partner do not want to go further, and in this case it's just lobola, nothing legal, you have to go through a divorce process. So may you please break that down? Because it does not make sense to me because in my head, divorce means law. It means something was signed at
Mhm.
the Home Affairs. But if nothing was signed at the Home Affairs, then why can't the people just go their separate ways? So why is there a requirement that they need to go through a divorce process?
Yeah, so you then need to look at what makes a customary
Okay.
marriage, right? So we're
Yeah.
looking at number one, you got the consent of both partners, and then there's a proper customary ceremony or handover, registration and home affairs within 3 months.
Mm,
But often happens is sometimes once that handover is done, although it's not automatic, but the courts have the power to recognize a marriage if after you do the process, the families sign consent to the marriage, and then the bride's family officially hands over the girl to the boy.
okay.
Such marriages can be deemed to have been a full customary marriage, even if they were not registered with Home Affairs. So you're going to
Um,
see right now, that's one of the, if you're following, after this, I'm just going to encourage the followers to, there's this famous DJ, is it Black Coffee,
yes, with
and
Anthony
Entle, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So I want you to read it, the judgment that came from the High Court on,
Mm,
I think it was on Friday or Saturday. There was actually a judgment which I thought was quite interesting for your podcast because it happened also on Friday.
yeah.
Is what was happening with DJ Entle and with Entle, sorry, and
Yes,
Black
yes, yes.
Coffee
Yeah.
was Black Coffee wanted to rely on a antenuptial contract,
Yeah.
similar to what people would call a prenup, to say
Yeah.
this is what you walk away with.
Mm,
But they had done a lobola.
mm-hmm.
And what the High Court then decided was because there was a lobola, Entle is going to walk away. That antenuptial contract was not effective, and Entle is now going to walk away with 50% of Black Coffee's entire estate, and that guy
Oh
is
my
worth
God.
millions, millions.
Yo,
So
that
now I'm sure Entle is it's massive. So, but the court has that power. So especially with the official customary. The customary rights have been fulfilled and the handover was done, even if you don't go and register, the
is.
courts have the authority at some stage to say this is a customary marriage, just to be able to protect, because it sometimes does happen that you have either a man or woman who they want to exploit each other. After lobola is like, okay, just come, let's just, and then they don't go register, and then at your
Mhm.
death that woman walks away with nothing, because so what you're then seeing now is people are going to the courts to say, we did this, but this man was refusing to go to Home Affairs to sign. And then they're afforded that protection by law. So although it's not automatic, you still, if anyone is considering going the customary marriage route, I'd say you need to ensure that you register it. You register after you do your lobola, and there is the official consent from the families. Just make sure you go and register it within 3 months. But even if that doesn't happen, it's not automatic that they will say that there was no marriage. That's why it then becomes important that if you want to go to the High Court to number one, before they can give you the divorce decree, what they will
Mm,
do is they will first have to officially acknowledge that they would have to first officially acknowledge that there was a marriage. So if after they've officially acknowledged it and now also granting you the divorce decree,
yeah.
the protection someone then dies, you then get, because it has happened that someone has a customary marriage, and then after, if that wasn't registered, and then after that they go and get married and they have a civil marriage with
Mm-hmm.
another wife, and then
Mm-hmm.
upon death, that previous partner can come back and actually lay a claim to the estate.
Okay, yeah,
So
that's hectic.
that's where that lawyer was also saying, if that happens, make sure that you also get a divorce decree, so that you don't get problems later on in life.
Yeah, true. Sure. Okay, it's a lot, but it's very
Yeah,
informative. So yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I don't know if this question is still relevant. Does
Mhm.
lobola immediately fall under the community of property? I do ask because recently I listened to a podcast and one of the lawyers mentioned that prior to your lobola, you can go and sign a prenuptial agreement, which could automatically take you out of the community of property. So do you mind just clarifying that for us as well?
Yes. So also, your customary marriage does not, after doing lobola, it does not automatically fall under. mm,
Community of
It doesn't
property.
automatically fall under, yeah, under in
Okay.
community. So
All
you
right.
can sign an antenuptial contract, if but you'd have to do it before.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you then do, right? Because if you don't have that, the minute that you go to Home Affairs, it becomes automatic. Is the minute that you go to Home Affairs and register that customary marriage without an ANC first, it then
Yeah.
automatically goes to in community.
Okay. All
But
right. Okay.
Lobola in itself doesn't say it's in community. It's where you go and
Um,
when you go and register and you didn't
mhm,
have an
mhm.
antenatal contract prior. That's
Okay.
where it becomes, yeah.
All right. Okay. Makes total sense. All right. That's
Mhm.
good. All right. So the next segment is the cross-border marriage. And this one really got me curious. I really want to know
Yeah.
about them. There is a scenario that I will read.
Mhm.
So let's just say the man is a foreigner and the woman
Mhm.
is South African. What are the steps and what are the steps should they take to marry in South Africa? What is needed, and if there are any, what are also the consequences? Because obviously now we're looking at people with different nationalities, and so how does that happen now?
So number one, when in South Africa, if one partner is not, um, if I mean one partner is not from South Africa, what they need
Yes.
is they need confirmation. We call that a non-impediment. So they need
Okay.
confirmation from your embassy
Oh.
or from your home country to say that you're not married there. So they need it, like they actually need a letter that's notarized from your home country that says before you even come with your IDs and stuff, the number one document you need to go. So I could be speaking to someone right now, and you could be a foreign national who wants to get married to a South African resident, or South African resident who wants to get the number one thing that that person, the foreigner, needs for that marriage to be registered here in South Africa is a non-impediment certificate. So a
Oh.
non-impediment certificate is where you go to your home country and then you go to the birth and marriage registry, birth, death, and marriage registry, and then there they give you a letter saying this person is. So I'm Zimbabwean, so I would
Mhm,
have needed to go to. That's what I actually did, right? I had to
mhm,
go to Zim. I had to go to the consulate here in South Africa. They had to give me, I had to pay, and then they had to send the documents to Zimbabwe. And then man is not married in Zimbabwe. They do that for one reason, is that your marriages, each country keeps their own record of marriages and birth
Mm,
and deaths. So
mm,
they cannot confirm if you're married. South Africa, there's no way South Africa confirm that a foreigner is married elsewhere without that certificate.
okay, okay.
The number one thing that you need to get. That's what you call the non-impediment certificate. Once you have the non-impediment certificate, they just need to ensure that you are legally resident, or you've got your valid visa or your valid
Yeah,
days that you are currently legal in South Africa. And then if you're legal in South Africa, you can then go with your non-impediment certificate, your passport, your affidavit, and they actually also they'll do an interview, and that's what they're doing now because the marriage regime in South Africa has been often been abused by people who just want to get married so that they can get a visa with their
yeah,
spouse. So they
yeah,
actually then sit you down and they're like, okay, how do you guys know each other? Is just for them to see that it's genuine. But then
yeah,
after that, the same documents that I mentioned that are needed for your civil marriage, like your IDs and stuff, that's what would still be required. But I think
yeah.
the only is your non-impediment certificate and making sure that you've got your a passport that has a valid stay in the Republic of South.
Okay. All right. Okay, that makes sense. And then, what if it happens vice versa now? So instead of the
Mhm.
man getting married in South Africa, he the American woman to a foreign nation, a country, be it Zimbabwe, Angola, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
How would that now affect the South African citizen in terms of, let's say, they do go and get married in another country, then they decide they want to come back and build a life here? How does it affect her nationality? And even if they have children, perhaps they want the children to have South African documents. How does that work now?
Okay, so the partner who goes, let's say, as you say, this South African woman, she wants to go get married in a foreign land. She's got a foreign marriage certificate. Nothing will
Mm.
affect her citizenship. So
Okay.
under no circumstances would you revoke your citizenship. In fact, if you are going to a country that allows for dual citizenship, that woman, after getting married, if she does, each country has its own separate immigration laws. Some may say after 5 to 10 years on a spousal visa, you can also become a permanent resident or citizen, depending on which
Yeah.
country it is. So most
Yeah.
countries, they actually do um, allow dual citizenship. So you may actually find that that person will end
Mm.
up being a citizen of two countries. Now,
Yeah.
what then happens is also what most countries allow is if either spouse, when you have children, the children by descendants, they can take the citizenship of either spouse. So the children, and it's up to the parents, they can even choose, even if they come back here, they would just need to notify the Home Affairs. They need to come
Mm-hmm.
with the proof of where the children were born. Even when they're there, they can even go to the embassy in that
Oh
foreign
yeah.
country just to tell them that, listen, uh, we have given birth. We want our children to take citizenship. South African citizenship by descendant. So descendants,
Oh yeah.
just by virtue of being a descendant, you can claim your citizenship. Same thing with, I'm just going to use myself as an example. I got married here. I've got a South African marriage certificate. I've got a South African ID, but by descent, right, I'm Zimbabwean. So when it was time for
Yeah.
us to choose where our children, their passports, we're going to take them from, my wife and I, we chose we want them to have Zimbabwean passports and to first have their Zimbabwean citizenship, and then later on we can work towards a South African citizenship. So you can choose by virtue of descendants.
Okay. Okay. So it's just a personal choice.
Yeah, it's a personal choice. I'll say more than a personal choice. It's also maybe you do a future forecasting as a family to say, where do we see ourselves more? What are the benefits of having this citizenship at this time? So it's
Mm.
just you need to just, you know, yeah, future forecasting really.
Yeah, true, true, true.
So
All right,
yeah.
that's really interesting. Okay. So with women being financially independent, especially in
Mhm,
this day and era, uh, should they protect their assets before marriage? And if so, of course, I was going to ask how do they do it, but you've already explained earlier with the with outside the community of property and etc. But one thing, like, just to be safe, women should protect their assets, in case something happens and maybe later on they
mhm,
lose their assets. Yeah.
mhm. So I'd say that that's a good question. But your marriage regime is not the only way you can protect your assets, right? So you can also even have a trust. If you were to establish a trust, you're single right now and you're financially independent and you don't want to lose your independence after marriage and you want to protect you
Mhm.
want to protect your estates, you can actually register a trust and then you put what you currently have in a trust. So the trust, what
Mm,
happens is a trust, it won't fall under a joint community, the joint estate. Well, if you have a
mhm.
trust in your name, a trust will have its beneficiaries, and if you're the only beneficiary, it means that the only beneficiary for the lifetime, for your lifetime. So that's
Okay.
the other alternative that you have, not just the marriage regime that helps you protect your assets, but also even trusts. And I think trusts are really good vehicles for young independent women who want to protect and who even want to grow their wealth. There are a lot of
Yeah.
benefits working with trusts. There's quite a lot of protections, and that would I think I could go on 2 hours speaking about trust, but so I'm not going to
Yeah.
bore people with trust. But that's another mechanism that women can use to
Okay.
safeguard their assets.
All right. Okay. All right.
Mm, mm,
That's actually, yeah. I actually never knew about that, but I think
mm,
that's, yeah, like you said, it's an alternative. All
mm,
right. Awesome. That's good. So, we want to look at the men's perspective when it comes to the legal side of marriage. And as a
mm,
married man, what do you think are some of the very important conversations people should have? So, of course, this is the dating stage or the courtship stage. What
mm,
would you say are the very important conversations they should have before the wedding? That is obviously the basic legal steps that they
mhm,
should take. What would
mhm.
you say is very important in such a season before the
Uh,
actual marriage? Yeah.
yeah, good question. So I'd say, I mean, I think a good marriage, it starts from communication, right?
Hmm.
That you set the foundation. A godly marriage, it starts from being able to communicate, being able to pray about what you guys are doing, and
Yeah.
being honest, right? So
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest conversations that a lot of people don't have is debt, right? So some
Yeah.
people, you get into business, you say, I'm just gonna take this 150,000 so that I can do my business. You're like, but my partner, there's no need for me to even tell them. But then the challenge comes now that if you get married in community of property, your partner is also assuming that debt, right? So they're taking
Mm.
that debt. So
Yeah.
now it becomes a challenge that you weren't open and honest to say, um, there's this debt that's going to apply.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I would say that's one of the conversations that need to happen is debts and generally assets being open to say this is what I have, this is what I owe, these are the properties that I have, and just to be open and honest, right? And even if it's stuff like you know ch children, some people have had children previously,
Yeah.
some people hide that, and it could end up just leading to a few complications after you get married in terms of even just the
Yeah.
responsibilities. So
Yeah.
I'll say just legally, you just want to both legally and also just from a Christian perspective, you just want to make sure that you've discussed everything. You've been open and honest from children um, to legal and debt obligations to
Yeah.
properties. Um, you know. just being able to forecast that if this were to come, we would be able to have this conversation without any fear in the future.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Mhm.
And in terms of debt, what if it happens that you ask someone about debt and they tell you, no, I don't have debt, and maybe they're lying? Is it a way to find out if they have debt? I don't know, maybe it's giving stalking, but sometimes then you find out they have debt now. Yeah.
So it's almost it's impossible. It's actually I would say it's impossible, but I'd say it's incredibly difficult
Okay.
because for you to be able to access their information, their financial information, I mean, it's difficult. I think that's where you have to really, if you believe in God as I do, is to really pray for your marriage, to really pray for your
Yeah.
spouse that they're open and honest with you, because apart from their word, you can never actually go and you can what you can search though is you can search if they're blacklisted, right? You won't
Oh,
be able to see. Yeah, you can if you go to a few companies, your tracers, and yeah, there are ways, or even you can ask him and just be open to say, okay, let's prove to each other, because you don't want to go behind their back,
okay.
because you'd be
Yeah.
doing the same thing that you're discouraging. So you're like, okay,
Yeah.
let's do this. Why don't we just go to Postnet? Let's do a criminal check.
Yeah.
Postnet does that.
Yeah.
Postnet does a full background check. So
Yeah.
you say, tell Postnet, please do a full background check on both of us. That shows us where
Mhm.
we are financially. If one of us is blacklisted, or not being able to carry their financial commitments, or if one of us has been arrested and they haven't told you, that's stuff that's going to
Mm.
show up on the criminal record, on the background check. That,
Yes,
like,
yes.
Postnet does it. Postnet, I think, and a few other centers, you find them around. If you know that there are issues and you want to really protect yourself, maybe you have a few red flags that you've seen. I think that's an alternative. You just say, "Hey, buddy, let's go,
Yeah.
let's
Let's
go,
go.
let's go do a background
Yeah.
check on each other."
Yeah.
You give him
Okay.
your results, he gives you your results.
Yeah. I think it's safer that way. And it can also build trust as well instead of going behind their backs. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, what advice would you give young men of this generation who there's a high chance that, they'll potentially marry professional women, independent with their own assets? Then, how can they
Mhm.
prepare to offer value beyond just money?
So I'll say, number one, I think we need to. I I truly think that we need to go back to the biblical principle of marriage.
Okay.
I think young men, a lot of people have lost God's design of what marriage is supposed to be, and I think that's what has caused a lot of problems. I think people think that even when we come to topics like submission, and there are a lot of things that I think young men they haven't been conditioned to think properly about it. But I
Mhm.
think if it's anchored in love, right? One of the greatest is Christ and the church, right? So Jesus Christ, and he's the bride, we're the groom, or we're
Yeah.
the groom, he's the bride, one of the two. But there's a covenant between us, and that shows you what a perfect marriage is. And what you see in that is there's advice. So to young men, I think, who are still seeking, whose view on marriage has been altered by, I think now we've got a lot of other male podcasts which are egocentric, and they just spew out toxic masculinity, about what submission is, and that's not the
Yeah.
actual godly principle. Proper submission comes through leadership and having your spouse truly understand that they're loved,
Yeah.
and in that they're able to follow your guidance. They trust
Yeah.
that you have their interests at heart. So I'd
Yeah.
say to any young men who are listening, you need to offer value beyond providing. What's your value?
Mhm.
How
Mm.
are you providing spiritual guidance, and even
Yeah.
just wisdom? When you speak, are people going to listen?
Yeah.
when you speak, are people just going to say, man, who does? Or are they going to actually say, okay, let me listen to this man because it's
Mm.
wisdom that comes from
Mm.
Christ. So, and just even emotional presence, I think that's one thing that, like right now, a lot of homes they end up failing because people are no longer emotionally available. Like
Mm.
again, because of toxic masculinity, a lot of young men think that being in marriage means I need to provide for my wife, and then I need to get home, and she needs to satisfy me, and then I need to make kids, and then I need to tell her what to do. If she doesn't do it,
Mm.
then we're
Yeah.
out. But that's not it, right? It's also about
Yeah.
maybe just emotional availability, um, and reliability, responsibility, and partnership, and even like parenting, like partnership, knowing that one day you're building a partnership, even though God has ordained you to be a leader of your family. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
you need to lead. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay. So before we enter into our last segment, which is the biblical principles, what let's talk about the new law where men can now take their wife's surname. What do you say about the
Yeah.
men?
um, Listen, I'm indifferent about it. I just I would say I don't support it because I think um I just think it's not proper. I think we have things in the name of uh, trying to be equal. I think a lot has
Mm,
changed in the traditional roles. I still think that there's some value to a traditional approach.
okay.
So I don't support it. I'm gonna be open, but I don't support it.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't see how, I just don't see how it works in the traditional definition. I just
Yeah,
don't see
I,
how it
I
works.
totally
So
agree with you. I,
yeah.
I I don't support it as well, even though I'm a woman. I do not
Yeah.
think I would
Yeah.
want my husband
Yeah.
to take my surname because I'm just like,
Yeah.
no. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I think even
It
biblically,
doesn't,
when
yeah.
you really look at it, it's not.
Yeah.
It's something is
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, I guess the law is the law, and they have their
Yeah.
reasons. Things are
Yeah.
changing, but I think if we can just stick to what we believe, our values,
Yeah.
then we can
Hmm.
just ignore what's
Hmm.
happening in the world.
Hmm.
Our last segment, biblical principles aligned to
Hmm.
marriage and legalism. So that is faith, divorce, and the
Hmm.
biblical view. So earlier you said you love
Hmm.
to talk to young people, and for young Christians who are not yet married, how do you think they can balance the reality of divorce laws with the belief that marriage should last forever?
Okay, I'm going to say this, right? I think one thing I think young people need to know is that, especially if you're Christian, is we are of this world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we are in this world, but we're not of this world. We
Okay.
believe to a different kingdom. And the
Mm-hmm.
kingdom and that's the kingdom of God. That's the kingdom that we believe in. There are different laws in that kingdom. There are different uh, um, ways to view things in the kingdom of God. I'd always say that we have to abide by laws because we're currently here on earth,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no law that says that if you're not happy, you need to divorce. Right? Often,
Okay.
unless they've been very, very from abuse, they're forced into that,
Yeah.
right? And they have to make a decision to protect themselves and to protect their lives and to get
Yeah.
out of that marriage.
Yeah.
But the biblical definition of marriage, it was a lifelong commitment. That's why if you go to Matthew 19, verse 6, it tells us that so the two are no longer, you're no longer two, but you're now one flesh.
Yes.
Right? So it shows that there's no way that you can morph into one flesh and then one day just then we are morphing again.
Mm,
There's
mm,
the provision even where in the Bible where you see Jesus speaking about divorce. What in the context of what is happening in that conversation is the Pharisees and the Levites. They were trying to trap Jesus with that question: is should
yeah.
someone are you allowed to divorce? And his Jesus' response was, because of the stubbornness of your hearts, if there's infidelity, right? It
Mm.
really shows us that what Jesus was trying to say is it shouldn't be permissible, but because of men,
Yeah,
the grounds where it could be permissible, like
yeah,
where maybe adultery is concerned.
yeah,
So it's a lifelong commitment. Now, I just want young ones who are looking to get married, who want to get married one day, just to know that get into it just with the knowledge that you're getting into a lifelong commitment. Don't think it's not going to be easy. Even when it's not easy, it doesn't mean you have to back out, right? Some of
yeah,
us, you've been in a toxic workplace, but you stay because you're trying to figure things out, and maybe one day it's going to get better. You know,
yeah,
sometimes that it could be a phase in your marriage, it could be a phase, but it doesn't. The original construct by our kingdom principles, by law
yeah,
and by biblical principles, is marriage is a lifelong commitment, right? So that's where we then need to look at just reconciliation and love. Love is patient, love is kind, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And also being a Christian myself, I think it's definitely something worth it because
Mhm,
you know it aligns. We by doing that we
mhm.
also align with the purpose of Jesus, the
Yes,
purpose of God.
yes,
So that's very
yes.
important. So I just want us to talk about, of course, we've spoken about the legal side, and in the legal side we have got marriage contracts, prenups and stuff. And then spiritually, like
Mhm,
now, we've got a covenant. So a husband and wife
mhm,
come together and married. It's a covenant. You represent Christ. How then do we separate the two? Because, um, you know, how as Christians, if I were to say, oh, I want a prenup, how do I then balance it, or how do we as young people balance it? Because now it might look like, okay, you're getting married, but you have a plan
mhm,
to
mhm,
throw in the towel one day in a few years to come.
mhm.
So, in such an instant, what do you say?
I would say um, the legal side is never meant to contradict the biblical side. And this is why I
Mm,
say this, that even with a prenup, um,
mhm,
I guess that one is a bit tricky because people have different reasons for wanting that. And some remember what we say, some people do it if you're doing out of community of property. Some people just do it, even though they're Christians, but they're doing it because they know that one of the spouse is in a high risk business. So if they were to get
um,
bust, everything that I have be taken because my partner is in a very high risk business. And if they were to lose 10 million and maybe the assets that they have, that partner has
mm,
is only 5 million, when the creditors come, they're going to look for the rest of the 5 million from my estate if we don't have an
mm,
out of community, right? So you
mm,
then look at it to say, where the Bible was never prescriptive to say you need to get married in community or out of community. But these are things that we encourage. You know, I think when you're looking at doctrine, when you're just looking at wisdom, that says
mm,
that there's better protection for both parties if you're doing things together as one unit. There's always better protection because you now have to think about each step you make, right? Because if you don't do it correctly, you know you're going to affect your family and your partner. You're
yeah,
not going
yeah,
to be as high risk anymore. So I would say
yeah,
there are different reasons, but at the end, as long as I think when young couples and young people get into marriage with the intention to say, I want to stay married and I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to do whatever it takes to ensure that I stay married, no matter how hard it gets. I want
yeah.
to keep my covenant and I'm going to be patient and I'm going to be kind to my partner.
Yes. Okay.
So I
Yeah.
think it's a balance, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's also a personal responsibility. You need to be accountable as well
Mhm,
to just make it work. So because of our time, I'm just gonna ask the last two questions.
mhm,
Statistics show that divorce rates are higher among non-religious couples compared to religious ones. So does it mean that the non-religious are doing something wrong, or does it mean that marriage is actually better in the context of faith? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I'll start with that, saying in scripture we know that God is love.
Mm-hmm.
So the greatest kind of love, before we
Mm-hmm.
get to um, eros kind of love, is your
Mm-hmm.
agape kind of love, the God kind
Mm-hmm.
of love.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know God, how are you going to know love? If God is love and you don't
Mm-hmm.
know God, how are you going
Yeah.
to know? You know,
Yeah.
it puts a lot of context into why when we preach, right, to say that you shouldn't be unequally yoked. You shouldn't be a believer and an unbeliever. The
Yeah.
stress that comes from that is not because we're being judgmental, but just because sometimes if you're not strong enough and if you the other partner is not willing to know about God, how are they
Yeah.
going to know how to love
Mm.
if
Mm.
God is love?
Mm.
I
Yeah.
always say, because God is love, you see that that's why most marriages are sustained. Because if you put God at the center of your
Mm-hmm.
marriage,
Mm-hmm.
then he's gonna show you how to love each other. You know, he's
Yeah.
gonna show you how to be patient.
Okay. All right. The last question, I feel like it's irrelevant because you have actually covered everything. I was going to ask if it's wise for Christians to marry within the community of property, but I think you've already touched that. So that is it from my side. I don't know if you have any parting shots to the viewers, to the podcast, just in conclusion.
As in conclusion, just to say, I truly I in my heart, I know there a lot there's a lot of influence from social media on what a happy marriage is supposed to be and the
Yeah.
image of what marriage is supposed to be. But I'll say, if you don't know the word of God, if you're not walking by the Spirit of God, you're
Mhm.
never going to truly understand God's design for marriage. So
Mhm.
even when you're looking for marriage, if you don't know how to be led, and if you're not being led by the Spirit of God, you're going to
Yeah.
be led into deception. I'd say
Mm.
it's quite an important time for young people, especially with the pressures that we're facing, with so
Mm.
many changes in the world. I just want to encourage believers to say, this is an important time, young believers, to pray. A lot of people are already saying marriage is not an achievement. Yes, it's not an achievement, but a godly marriage, I think that's something that's supposed to be celebrated, right? I
Yeah.
think you need to have.
Yeah. Your audio. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so I'd say, okay, oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So I'd say, keep God at the center of it.
Yes.
That's my advice. Just keep God at the center of it.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Mm.
That's good advice. Keep God at the center of everything. Be it legal, be it spiritual. Yeah, I guess this is it. I don't have anything from my side, but I just want to say once again, thank you so much for making time. Thank you so much. This was equipping, this was elevating, and I really appreciate the information you've shared with us. And to everyone who's watching, thank you so much for joining. Tell a friend, subscribe to the show, and I'll see you guys next time. Mr. Blessing Wadesango, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. I had a lovely time. Thank you, viewers.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone tuning in.
You are welcome. Thank you so much. Have
All
yourself a
right.
good afternoon.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yes, guys.
Bye.